So dudes, it's your boy Tuhu. In this video, I want to talk about 3D storytelling in gacha games and why in the long run, it doesn't work. Now, obviously, I'm mainly talking about Genshin Impact here, but any gacha game, present or future, that features 3D animation and models as a core part of their storytelling also applies here. So for example, Star Rail, Z3, Wuthering Waves, Arknight's Enfield, Project Mugen, Azure Familia, NTE, etc. And the reasons why I want to talk about this is because this is something that I've discussed quite a few times before on stream, so I figure making a standalone video like this about this topic is worth doing so that whenever someone else asks me about this on stream in the future, I can just point them here. That, and given my strong opinions on this matter, I sincerely hope that developers for upcoming gacha games don't make the same mistakes that current gachas, Genshin, have made so that their own stories can be as immersive and compelling as they can be. First, let me give you a bit of context. It's October 2020, Genshin Impact just came out, and oh my god, this game is fucking beautiful. It's basically sex for the eyes, straight up weeb eye candy that's so good that not a single gacha game before or since has been able to match its sheer art fidelity so far. Not to me anyway. But most importantly, it's entirely in 3D. Since it's an open world RPG and all that. As such, the whole story is in 3D too, with characters interacting with each other in their own 3D models. Back then, for veteran gacha players like me, this was basically a revolutionary concept because very few gachas ever featured anything in 3D, much less their entire story. All gacha games that we were used to back in the day were 2D and storytelling was done in the classic visual novel style, with character art or sprites talking to each other with dialogue text boxes. So going from this to this was, at least for me at the time, a huge breath of fresh air. And combined with Genshin's amazing visuals and satisfying gameplay, it contributed heavily to why I think that first month or so of playing Genshin back when it first came out was probably the single best month I have ever had as someone who calls himself the god of gacha. So what changed? Right? If Genshin's 3D storytelling was one of the reasons for one of my best months I've ever had in my history of gacha gaming, what the hell happened for me to switch sides and say that 3D storytelling is no longer a good idea for gacha games to have? Well, unfortunately, the whole 3D storytelling method that Genshin bet its entire story on pretty much aged pretty terribly, at least for me. Mainly because once you get over the novelty of it, it's actually not all that immersive. Immersion in stories is kind of a funny thing to me because I'm the type of person who usually doesn't pay attention to like how immersive a story is, or maybe it's more accurate to say that it doesn't take much for me to get immersed in a story if I find it worth my time reading or watching. But Genshin has managed to make me realize how easily its story broke my immersion and thus my motivation to follow it in any meaningful way. It only seemed cool back in the day because Genshin was new and a gacha game like it had never been done before, so the honeymoon factor back then was insane. But once that honeymoon period was over, right, once the game lost its original mysticism and I got a grasp of the formula that MiHoYo was using for its story, it lost the majority, if not all of the immersion for me immediately because I realized that all I was doing when I'm reading or technically watching Genshin's story is staring at characters run around doing stock animation bullshit while going on and on and on about whatever the fuck's going on right now or whatever it is that they're doing or need to do next. And I don't know about you, but the vast majority of Genshin's story being played out with mostly the same animations that the game's had for the past 4 years is a huge buzzkill for me because there are quite a few scenes that would have looked a lot better and been a lot more compelling had they had better or more fitting animations to show what was going on. But instead, we get character A doing stock animation number 4, and then character B doing stock animation number 12. Shit like this, man. Naturally, this extends to the NPCs as well. The fact that all of the NPCs in the game are basically the same models or types of models with a different layer of paint on them depending on the region isn't great, but at least it's understandable given the sheer scale of the game at this point, and it would probably be too much to ask for like totally unique body models for NPCs in every single region. I mean, hell, Ito still doesn't have a muscular body type like he should have, so what are the chances that MiHoYo gives their NPCs any better treatment? But MiHoYo should have greatly expanded their animation library at the very least over the years so that their characters can do more interesting things in order to portray the story better. They have done this to a small extent, to be fair, but it's nowhere near enough because even to this day, there are scenes that could have looked a lot better if they had more tailor-made animations to better show what was going on. Like, I remember one story scene in Fontaine where Furina's either eating a piece of cake or having some tea, I forget which, but because Genshin doesn't have these specific animations that would have made that scene look more natural, MiHoYo had to use camera angles in order to make it look like Furina's eating or drinking or whatever. Spoiler warning here, but another example is at the end of the Mountain King questline in Natlan, when Kinich pulls out some sort of device that's meant to yeet the Mountain King into the abyss or whatever. The chief of the Natlan tribe that worships the Mountain King interrupts Kinich by knocking the device out of his hands, but since they don't have the animation for that, they just show the chief like literally running into Kinich, and that looks really dumb. It's scenes like these that really ruin the immersion for me, because instead of enjoying the story, I'm more inclined to point out or observe how fucking stupid some of these scenes look and how artificial Genshin storytelling feels as a result overall. And having dealt with 4 years of this shit, I'm not really looking forward to God knows how many more. As a side note that I like to discuss here, since I feel like some of you guys will try to bring this up yourselves as a counterpoint, is that I'm aware of other non-gacha games that do 3D storytelling, and that since they can pull it off, why can't gacha games do the same? Here's the thing though, they're not gacha games. Normal games can do 3D storytelling better than gacha games can because there's eventually an end to them, so developers can afford to focus on animating the models in a more believable and immersive manner. But gacha games are live service games, so they're usually not designed with like a finite end in mind. As long as they keep printing money and their studios are willing to keep them going, they'll stick around and never end. So it's more efficient for gacha devs to work off of cookie cutter formulas as they keep developing their games rather than give their stories full custom animation, which unfortunately diminishes their stories' immersion depending on how quickly they get old and how fucking stupid they look. On the other hand, you may not like it, but this is what peak gacha game storytelling looks like. There are quite a few reasons why most, if not all, gacha games before Genshin followed the whole visual novel style of storytelling. First, characters are depicted with their base arts in story, but instead of animation, since they're not 3D, they use character expression sheets that their artists make that come with a variety of expressions to fit whatever situation that they'll be put in, so that their actions and reactions to whatever's going on feels natural and organic. Since I brought up NPCs earlier, I'll mention here that gachas with visual novel storytelling also tend to do NPCs better too, since they usually go out of their way to give NPCs from different regions or factions their own art. Technically, it's not that much different from what MiHoYo does with their own NPCs, but at least with 2D ones, you know that their art was drawn from scratch rather than come from, the same base models and then just have different textures applied to them like 3D NPCs are. And that actually does a lot to make 2D NPCs feel unique, which in turn helps with the immersion of those stories. And second, 2D storytelling has infinitely more creative freedom with effects to better portray their stories. Stuff like non-playable fight scenes, flashbacks, and other literary devices are much more compelling in 2D than 3D, at least for gacha games, because they can get real crazy with the special effects in a way that you just don't find in 3D gachas like Genshin or Star Rail or the like. Not to mention, characters in those situations can also sell them a lot better with their variety of expressions and make those literary devices a lot more effective in their storytelling. It's not that 3D gachas can't ever do this, right? Genshin has quite a few scenes like flashbacks where it uses filters and camera angles to show what's going on, but again, character models with stock animations running around doing stock animation things can easily ruin whatever the story was trying to go for. Matter of fact, if they want to, 3D gachas can easily produce some of the best immersive story content throughout the gacha industry in the form of custom animated cutscenes. Hell, Genshin's custom cutscenes are, for me, the only reason why you should even pay attention to the story at all. They're just that good most of the time. But the issue is that they're very rare. In Genshin's case, you only get like 1 or 2 of these animated cutscenes like per story expansion or something. Like if MiHoYo somehow had the absolute Giga Chad energy, the absolute balls to custom animate their entire story, then that would actually be a huge argument in favor of gachas doing their storytelling in 3D. But that's not the case now, is it? Like, you have to slog through hours of a story at a time just to get a minute or 2 of fancy-ass animated story when there are so many other scenes that also deserve this custom animation treatment. Like, I get that there can't be a lot of, like, big fight scenes that, you know, are custom animated like this, because I imagine those are very hard to make, but MiHoYo should custom animate more scenes, right, that are easier to do and put them into the story at regular intervals to give Genshin a better sense of immersion that it just doesn't have right now. Last thing I want to bring up here, a big part of a story's immersion is how good the story itself is. The more compelling and enjoyable the story, the more you're willing to overlook other parts of it that aren't as good. If Genshin's story was something that I found enjoyable and fun to read, then I probably wouldn't be making this video right now. But it's not. I think the overall plotline of Traveler getting separated from their twin and searching all around Teyvat for them is alright, especially with the twist that, you know, their twins somehow ended up becoming the leader of the main bad guys that they've been fighting against all this time. But it's been 4 years of getting their ass tossed from Archon to Archon like we're playing fucking Mario. Matter of fact, the closest we've ever come to figuring out what the hell the other twin's up to is from us cooperating with not the Archons, but with a couple of Kanrians like Dainslev, Karabur, and his son. So honestly, what the fuck are we even trying to consult the other Archons for when every single one of them up until now haven't told us shit? More to the point, the story is more realistically just, oh, the Traveler walks into the next region, gets asked to resolve whatever main issue that the nation's got on their hands at the moment, beats the shit out of the bad guys, and then at the end asks the Archon or whoever else is in charge to tell him where the fuck their brother or sister went, only to get the fucking Princess Peach treatment, and then repeat that shit all over again. The story is stale as fuck. It might get a new coat of paint every year with each new region expansion, sure, but at its core, it's more the same shit every time. Fontaine is the only region that so far kinda breaks that mold, because it was more about the Fontainians like breaking their curse, and the Traveler was more helping them out rather than having a more direct involvement like they usually do. It makes sense then that I thought Fontaine's storyline is so far the best one that Genshin's done, since it's something at least a little different, especially now that Natlan's here, and so far the story seems like it's gone back to the usual cookie cutter formula of, you know, Traveler comes to a new region, kicks ass and chews bubblegum, and gets called a hero everywhere they go. You know, typical Chinese gacha story bullshit that I discussed earlier in my Wuthering Waves video. To round out this video, I want to point out that MiHoYo themselves is aware that their own 3D storytelling methods are getting less and less effective over time, and you can see it in their most recent game, Zenless Zone Zero, and even in Genshin's newest expansion in Natlan. Because in Z3, the story is done in, well, 3 ways. The usual open world stuff where characters talk to each other out in the open, in the overworld, with their 3D models and all that. But also, it features a manga-style presentation where you have static panels showing stuff going on, and even a visual novel format where you have 1, 2, or even up to 3 characters on screen at a time talking about stuff. And Z3 makes it so that no one format dominates the game. It feels like there's an even spread of each style of storytelling, which makes it so much easier to immerse yourself into the story, because if you're like me and you're not a fan of like stock animation storytelling, then you have the manga style or the visual novel formats to look forward to. And of course, you still have your occasional custom animated cutscenes, especially with Z3's godlike animation. And even in Natlan, MiHoYo has been putting in a few pieces of dedicated artwork that fit whatever situation you're in, like the scene where you go swimming with Paimon and Mualani when you go hang out with her tribe. This is something that they've very rarely done in the past. Matter of fact, I can't seem to recall a single time that they've done something like this before. Could be wrong. It's just that it feels like they're including art like this fairly regularly throughout Natlan's story, in stark contrast to how they usually handle it. And I'd like to think that they're doing this because they've come to realize that 4 years of mostly stock animation footage has caused the quality of their story to atrophy, and they have to do something to make the experience of going through Genshin's story at least somewhat more interesting than it has been for a long time. In any case, those are my thoughts on why I think 3D storytelling does not work in gacha games right now. At least not with the way Genshin does it. At the very least, it's gotta be supplemented with other storytelling formats like what Zenless Zone Zero does. Otherwise, you might as well just open up a stock footage website somewhere, put all their clips on repeat while you put on Genshin's story on autoplay in the background, and go fuck off and do something else for an hour, since the game still doesn't have a skip button even after 4 fucking years. Oh, and don't forget to tab back in every once in a while to click on a random dialogue choice that doesn't matter 99% of the time. And that's a damn shame too, because Genshin's exploration, on the other hand, is one of the best things about the game. Just running around the overworld, collecting treasure chests and fighting stuff. Exploration is insanely immersive, so it's unfortunate, really unfortunate, that going through the story feels like an absolute chore in comparison. So hopefully in the future MiHoYo can keep improving their story to eventually make it something worth reading for someone as jaded as me, and hopefully other devs can take some pointers from this and, you know, figure out ways to make sure that their own stories avoid the same mistakes. That'll do it for this video. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. I also dual stream to both YouTube and Twitch, twitch.tv/ToastSniper98, and stop by if you want to hang out and talk about Gacha. Check out the Patreon if you want to see your name show up at the end of these videos, and until next time, be cool y'all, and see you in the next one.